Blessed love and peace in Rastafari, and we're pushing it further, still going lower. Further insight about from the World Civilization Studies recent experience on the consideration is observing how different tribes respond to the initial advance of the approach of imperialism, world imperialism. Um, in the Western Hemisphere, it happens in Europe and Africa, in Asia too. But looking at the tribes, because it's such a stark contrast. Um, some tribes absorb, some tribes broker deals and actually try to pit the different colonists against each other. Some migrate and move and take proactive, following visions and dreams. Some are very diplomatic, some are further effective, some spread out, some move back forth from different regions. A lot of different methodologies. Those are just some of them. Some of it is intentional, some of it is de facto, just responsive ad hoc measures. There's warfare, and all different types of stuff. So when we look in the larger context of how the prophets, our ancestors and sages, respond to the imperialism, again, Abraham Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Jesus, we talk about the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Kong Tzu, and additionally, we talk about this notion, this endeavor of getting away from society, getting off grid. And so there's the scenario of leaving the boundary and residing in another place and attaching oneself to another community. There's the scenario of leaving the vicinity and becoming nomadic, being a shepherd, like Abraham Avinu. And there are a few other different scenarios. Now, when we talk about looking at just native history and native culture on this Western Hemisphere, there's an intrinsic migratory pattern or migratory behavior and a migratory lifestyle, particularly towards the plain states, but through much of the continent too, at different periods of the past few thousand years. There are settlements, there are villages and stationary dwellings, but there's a lot of migratoriness, and so that's part of the wisdom in the solutions as well. Now, all that being said, again, the entire world is claimed. The entire world is surveillanced. So it's implausible to physically leave the grid in the way that it's done thousands of years ago, or even a few hundred years ago. In addition to that, attuning oneself with the natural migrations of the earth, again, still is within the purview, the proclaimed purview of imperialism, saying, oh, well, you can't migrate here because it's private property. And one can delve into the whole rationalizations of, well, I'm not human, so you don't have, legal rights don't apply to this thing. It's like birds or deer. But then one avails oneself to getting shot and eaten like birds and deer. Serious. So anyways, solution, what is it? One is letting go of imperialism, letting go of that eventuality, because in each of these different ventures of the prophets that I mentioned, Moshe Rabbeinu, Avraham Avinu, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Buddha, even Jesus, definitely, there is an eventual rise of imperialism amongst the followers of each of those teachings. And so in that imperialism, with each one, that's not hate, it's just facts. In the imperialism of each one, there is that predatoriness, and that's the exact predatoriness that the fortified cities and the preceding empire is endeavoring to prevent and thwart and otherwise. So it's a matter of genuinely, as much as possible, given the track record of world civilization, cultivating that non-predatoriness within ourselves, within our way of being, within our shared way of being, and teaching that to our progeny, so that generations after generations, door over door, for the next 7 generations and beyond, there is that non-predatoriness that we're recognized as not a threat. And the plausibility of that non-predatoriness is increasingly, perhaps ironically, substantial, because part of that non-predatoriness is not accepting the weapons, the guns. not drinking the alcohol, and not pretending the superiority, and thus not being even a viable threat or even a likely threat or a remote threat to the imperialist ambitions. Being honest, being compassionate, not getting mad, being matter of fact, calling things out, in like against whatever is happening, but then also not condemning and saying, acknowledging the benefits that imperialism provides, because it does. That's what's nasty. The most convincing deceptions have so much truth in it. So, woo-wee, sake. So that's where we find a solution. And how does that look? Does it require being migratory, like Lao Tzu and Kung Tzu, moving from province to province? Maybe. There is a legitimacy within having a relationship with the nature, knowing the trees and the natural life where one is born and raised. There is legitimacy within that. And that's something that is beneficial for the imperialist hierarchies to recognize and value as well within the relationships, within the kinfolk that the imperialists have relationships with, the kinfolk who are on this path. This path meaning of honesty, truth, however kinfolk describe them. So that means that there is a benefit to stationariness. It's not a requirement, but there is a benefit to that. There's also a benefit with flexibility and not being hard fast and not making territorial claims, not claiming ownership of land. And additionally, in whatever agreements are brokered, that it is understood in that context, and that when the wars happen, like with the Revolutionary War, the French and Indian War, so-called Indian, the 1812 Civil War, and additionally, when it's two factions against each other, and then there's outsiders and who are nearby and have the tendency of picking a side, not to pick sides, and be very forthright about that. It's very difficult, like Bob Marley in the Caribbean, Jamaica, but that's the methodology, that's the path, and to be very proactive and pronounced about that, being very public, and saying this is where our priorities are, this is what our commitment is to, and also being knowledgeable about what are the theologies of the foreigners, what are the notions of belief and authority that influence the behavior of the foreigners, and being literate with that, having literacy with that, and knowledgeable, and be able to converse along those lines. So it's not just relying upon people's word. And additionally, because we know how that goes, we don't even talk about treaties with the United States. It's all violations. So every U.S. treaty is renamed a U.S. violation, because that's what it is. And the world is getting onto that kind of a trope as well. So that's where things are increasingly trepidatious. So we're at 2 now, and we're at the low 2. The low 2. So again, humble, honesty, compassion, modesty, non-predatoriness, being flexible, emphasizing the preference and the benefit of being in one's own habitat, the flexibility of migration, even visiting and consulting, providing service, recognizing the tangible practical needs, being universal in terms of diplomacy, proactive and public about that, keeping distance from discord, not having a sense of superiority, continually calling out truth, out beyond oneself and within oneself. As I said, again, consistent diplomacy, letting go of concepts and practices of ownership, standing up when there are egregious affronts, not being pushovers and just pacifying and unduly absorbing transgressions, having a repertoire of being able to defend oneself in a righteous way and making that public. So these are some of the methodologies, and let me tell it, let us tell it. We see practices of this, examples of this through history. There are certain lineages of this. And some of it is unprecedented because the nature of world civilization and imperialism is unprecedented, the boundaries particularly. So, all that being said, that's what I just say. Ba-da-ba. All thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim. Blessed love and peace in Rastafari.